How many of you kids went to camp this last week? Any of the kids from camp here? You were one of the kids who went to camp? I know that. I noticed that. That's very good. No, I really enjoyed that. I was bunked with the grade 5, so you could kind of picture that. Just get a little idea of grade 5 boys there overnight. It's a little bit of a trek. It was fun though. My good wife is down in Kelowna right now. We're about to have another grandbaby, so that'll make 6, I think. And so it's the first rhymer showing up, so I'm pretty excited about that. So right after this service, I'm going to get in the car and see if I can make it there before the child is actually born. So it'll be down in Kelowna, so that'll be pretty good. We're looking forward to that. Anyway, greetings from Sparwood. Those guys really appreciate you with all you do and support given their way. It's actually been a real pleasure working with those guys. I really appreciate it. They're a good bunch. Anyway, I thought we'd get into a little bit of scripture this morning. We're looking in Colossians chapter 3. When Sean and I did kind of separate messages, I did the first part of that down in Sparwood. And it's on the same type of topic as what the guys are going through. And so I thought I'd just finish that off today, if we could. So anyway, if you want to take a look in Colossians chapter 3, we're looking at verse 11 down to about 14, if you want to look up in your Bibles there. I played a lot of hockey starting from when I was a little kid. And if I remember correctly, this one time I was playing, it was in Enderby, and it was in the old curling rink. Okay, now I don't know if you've been there before, but the boards were really low, and it's like one of the old-fashioned type rinks. And we were just little kids at that time. And if I remember correctly, one of my guys, they went out and they kind of ran into another little kid in the middle of the ice, all right? And he seemed to get a little disoriented because when he got up, he grabbed the puck and he started going the wrong way. All right? Now, all the coaches, that are on there, and the parents start going, as soon as he crossed, like it was okay when he went from the red line and kind of hit about the blue line, but as soon as he crossed the blue line, was kind of focused on our goalie all by himself, everybody started getting a little concerned, and parents started yelling, and players started yelling, but then, it just seemed to excite him a little bit more, and he picked up speed, and he came in on the goalie, and he made a phenomenal move, and just put that puck in the empty net, right? And he's cheering, and he's got the stick up, and he's doing the dance, right? There's only one problem, right? Wrong team. You scored 4, buddy. And so as soon as he found that out, I think there was cheers. I'm trying to remember back to this whole thing, but it was kind of it was a big deal when I was a kid. Here we have a guy on our team went and scored on our team, right? And it just didn't seem to fit, really that well. But, it's kind of funny. Like if the odd time you might have you watch an NHL and this type of thing, or juniors, there's the odd time where you have a puck come in and it'll go off a guy's shin into his own net, right? Or a guy goes to make a pass, hits the back of this goalie, and it goes in the net. You've seen a couple of those ones. Or the goalie, who tries to clear the puck and kind of be fancy. He gets out there and he fans on the puck, and the puck goes in the net. But for the most part, when you're looking at grown-ups, you don't end up scoring on your own team that much. I mean, if you were playing in rec league hockey, right, and that means guys from about in their 20s up to whatever, and, they've been playing hockey for a while. And you had a grown man go and score on his own net. Okay? Would this be a normal thing? No. What would be some of the excuses? It would be maybe he had too much beer in the dressing room and he came out a little loopy. Or, maybe the team was not probably his favorite team he's played for, and so he decided to score on his own team because he was kind of ticked off about this whole thing. Maybe that's the case. But the reality is, if you have an adult, who is playing for a team and ends up scoring against the team, that's not a good thing, is it? In fact, you start questioning the character of the person and this type of thing. When in reality, this is really what happens in the church often, right? You have folks within the church, they wear in the jersey of Jesus, right? Because you're in the church. But sometimes the actions and the functions of someone doesn't necessarily represent who Jesus is or the team Jesus is on. In fact, sometimes some of the moves played by Christians end up scoring a goal for the other team, not helping out. I remember, back in Princeton there, where I just came from, there was a couple of sports teams that we actually worked with. And one of them, we took over a swim club, which turned out to be a little tough on church because all the games were on the summer were all the, they don't call them games. What do they call them? What's that? Meets. All the meets were on Sunday morning. Okay, so I didn't really realize this. We were gathering all these folks, and all the young couples would go out and camp at these different meets on Sunday mornings, and they would play. But they weren't showing up on Sunday, but at least they were gathered at a place, and they were all kind of functioning, and they were doing ministry to the community, and that was the purpose of what we were doing out there. And then for the first year and a bit, it went really well until all the Christians started fighting with each other. Okay. And that did not go well. Okay, it really didn't go well. And all these ladies were mad at each other, and they're choked about, my kid didn't get in it, la, 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 la. And it went on to a point where, they got to the point where they'd come to church and not talk to each other. Not happy about that. The pastor thing in me was kind of going, I don't know, this is probably not good, right? On the other hand, we had a ball team. And the ball team, just to kind of, it would probably give you a good idea of what it was all about in terms of our viewpoint. I had an intern who had never played ball. I said, your job is to set up the ball team. And he looked at me and he says, fine, we're going to call the team Ridiculous. And so he was all happy about this. But the rules on our ball team was this, and it functioned for about 5 years. We really don't care about playing ball. The idea is we're going to talk to people about Jesus. That's the reason we're playing ball. We're not playing ball to win ball games. We're playing ball to represent Jesus out there. And so if the other team really didn't like the call, how on these type of teams you make the rules for your own team, like you call with strikes on your own team, you call the guys that are out and the other guys do it the same way. That way everybody's up in their own game, right? And if you had teams that complain about it, no, that was not, he was out, he wasn't safe, we'd say, okay, he's out. Because we didn't really care, because the point of the game was to be a witness about Jesus, not necessarily to win the ball game. The funny part is we won most of our games because we had some really good players, but we just didn't care about the ball game, so we were having a hoot the whole time we were out there, and we were having fun. And we had a ton of people come to church off the ball team, just simply because we were a good team in terms of representing Christ out on the field, because we really didn't care about ball. We cared about Jesus. And these are some of the different aspects that, that come into play when we're talking about representing Jesus, right? Now, if you're going to play on Jesus' team, it'd be good to be wearing his jersey and actually be scoring in the opposition's net, not in our own net, right? And what it takes in order to be able to do that is to be able to lay out a plan of action and to follow that. And this is what Paul is getting into here in Colossians chapter 3. All right? And if you want to take a look at the first, if I'm getting boring in the midsection here, read the first few verses from verse 1 down to about 10, and I'll give you a background, which actually is really quite deep, about the same topic, and I'll give you a little bit of connection as well. But here, let's read the verses of this time. This is Paul speaking. He says, "Here there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian or Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any one of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." I think this whole passage is giving us a description of what the jersey of Jesus Christ looks like. It gives a description of what being on the team of Jesus Christ looks like. Let's take a look in verse 11. It says, "Here there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarians, Scythians, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all." When I was a young guy, I grew up in my father's house, and he was a rhymer, all right? And what that really meant is that he was very pro-rhymer in my family. If you were a rhymer, you were somebody. If you weren't a rhymer, well, you existed. It was pretty good. And I know it sounds bad, but my family moved around quite a bit, and so our friends really didn't kind of stick as friends. What they were kind of acquaintances. My family was tighter than really my friend groups because we moved around so much that the friends didn't stick around. And so the only consistency we had was family. And so my brother and I were really close. My dad and I were really close. Like, the family was just tight, and we did a lot of things together. And my dad would make statements like, I'd say, "Well, Dad, those guys, they do this." And he goes, "Well, but Mel, they're not rhymers. Like, they don't get it, right? Like, obviously you're a rhymer, you'd kind of get that, but they're not a rhymer, so don't worry about it, right? They can go do what they want to do, but we as rhymers, we don't do that, right?" And, we had certain things that were, like, he was a new Christian in about 30, 35, right? And so, some of his passions on things weren't, exactly lined up. Like, if no one picks on a rhymer, you don't talk bad about a rhymer. And we will all make sure no one talks bad about a rhymer. So, I remember one time he sent me back 3 times to fight the same guy that I lost at, right? Because no one insults a rhymer, right? And may mercy be on the person that anyone ever insulted my mother. She was everything to the whole family. My dad made it very clear that my mother was the most important thing that could ever possibly exist. And so you did all you could to protect our ladies. And he had virtues of this. And he instilled that in us. And there's a whole pile of other things. Some are really good, and some I got to kind of work out as a pastor, right? But if you'd asked me when I was a kid, what are your qualities? I'd have probably answered, "Well, I'm a rhymer," assuming you would understand what that meant. I think when it comes to, how we view ourselves, there's a huge impact on what we pull off or do from that, right? Because I was a rhymer, there were certain things that I did, and the more I bought into that, the more I either accomplished in the good or bad. And how I viewed myself in terms of what team I was on definitely impacted what I did. Did I score on this goal, or did I score on that goal? It's interesting, as a pastor, I get to watch a lot of different people raise their kids. I get to see a lot of families. I get to know a little too much sometimes with a lot of our families, just simply because people want to talk about different things, and I like to watch people, and I like to see how they do things. And oftentimes when you see 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 families raising kids, you get to see how they raise kids. And you get to see then how those kids turn out. You get to see how those kids grow up. You get to see how those kids, who they marry, and how they raise their kids. I got some guys that were in my youth group, they're in their 50s now. Okay? And I've kept in touch with these people, for a lot of years, because we've had, a good relationship. But it's interesting how things are full of patterns, and there's nothing really new under the sun. Oftentimes 2 + 2 = 4, right? But different people's values and systems are really ingrained in us. Like, if you have ideas in terms of who you are as a family, they are passed down. But also your DNA is passed down. Like, I have buddies of mine who didn't know their full parents that functioned totally like their parents, even though they were not raised by their parents. Okay? It's quite something. And we all have this picture, good or bad, of ideas of who we are. And that definitely impacts what we do. And this is something that we really need to get a grasp on. And I think in terms of Paul going through Scripture, this is what he's laying out. This is what a Christian looks like. And also it affects how we view ourselves. And it plays out good and bad. Like if you take a look at a lot of ladies that end up in troubled marriages and they marry guys that are just full of trouble, and it's funny, but you can take them out of that relationship, all right, and put them in a new spot, in a new area, and they will go find that exact guy, just a different face, and they will go directly to them. It's like there's a magnet, because they have a self-viewpoint that says, this is what I deserve. And they will go directly to the person that they shouldn't go to, in my head, because they're just wired that way. There's some different things in our culture that just kind of does repetition as well. Like right now, most of our young men are not growing up solid. I've noticed, like in different stats and stuff like that, in Canada, 27% of all young men at 27 years of age, so 27 and 27, live at the house of their parents. Do you guys remember just the other day there's that family that had to take a lawsuit against their kid to get him out of the house? Do you remember that? Just think about that. There's a reason for that. And it's because the young guys are not cluing into who they are. They have not actually established enough character in their own head and affirmed themselves in this manner to depict or describe what they're supposed to be all about. Because who people think they are is what they go and do. Right? So let's just kind of work our way down here. It says, here there is no Gentile or Jew, right? So basically, in our culture of Christ, all right, there's not a Canadian part to us and an American, or if we're from Mexico, we're not Mexican, or for some other country, our culture, or even in our denominational backgrounds, right? It does not play into being a Christian. What plays into being a Christian, I'm going to have to take this thing off, man. I think every time I come here, it's the same. I think my ears are just different than Sean's or something. Is it possible we could do this? Okay. I'll try to keep it as close to my mouth as I can there. That was probably a $1,000 drop there. That's good. It says we are Christ followers, right? We're not Jew, barbarian, or Scythian. Scythian is kind of the Samaritans kind of took them over. And so you're looking at, it's not different cultural divides, right? Like, you're not Jewish, or you're not sort of Samaritan, or you're not a barbarian. Like, it doesn't matter your cultural backgrounds. Like, that does not get brought into church. It's funny that most of our denoms are set up from different cultural viewpoints, right? Because the people that moved into these countries here spoke different languages, so we kind of congregated based on language and culture rather than in Christ, right? We're not slave or free. We don't recognize social positions. So folks, if we had someone from the food bank come here, he should be able to be an elder in the church, right? If we have someone that's at a different position than us socially, that does not affect our spiritual setting. And that's very hard to actually maybe understand in Canada. We talk about equality, but in reality it's not, right? Because we have a huge amount of dispositions towards different segments of people, right? And we don't like to talk about it, but it's just the fact of it. It's funny, in Acts, I think it's in Acts, maybe I'm misspeaking, but Paul was saying, when you become a Christian, to the folks, don't try to move into new political, don't try to move out of your social position. Stay where you are and do ministry where you're at. So social position is just simply, one section of the team. You're still on the team and part of the team. And this is the type of thing we need to understand, that these things do not apply in changing where we stand with Christ within the church. It says, at the end of it says, Christ is all and is in all. Right? If we're on Christ's team, He is all to us. He is involved in every part of our life. He's saying it just nukes everything that is around us that is not of Him. So in the morning when we get up, we ask Him, Lord, what is it you want me to do? Who do you want me to talk to? What do you want me to pull off? Because my entire day is for You, Lord. When you start walking and you meet people around, you say, Lord, do you want me to talk to them? Do you want me to help them? Because our focus is on Christ and following Him, not setting up our own agenda based on who we are, right? In the sense of the secular term. And then in verse 12 it says, therefore. And this basically means, because of all the things we've just discussed. And if you go down from verse 1 all the way through that, it's bringing all those elements together, and it's saying, because of all of this, right, we have just discussed, it says, therefore, as God's chosen people, and he starts to describe who he's talking about. Who is the Christian? Right? And he says, and by the way, notice this, he's beginning to tell us who we are before he tells us what to go do, right? You ever notice that? I like that. He tells us who we are before we go, he wants us to go do something. Because if we don't know who we are, we don't necessarily know how to go do it. Because if you're a hockey player, you play hockey. If you're a hockey player that doesn't play hockey, you're a guy that talks about hockey but doesn't play hockey. If you're a Christian, or a person that calls himself a Christian but doesn't act like a Christian, guess what? You're not a Christian. You're someone who talks like wants to be a Christian but doesn't actually go be a Christian. Right? You see how that flushes out? And he's telling you who we are. And he's saying, identifying it first, and then he's going to give us some assignments. He says, you are God's chosen. Isn't that cool? Just think about this, folks. Just think about this. Say you take a look at all of humanity that will ever be or ever have been. And God put them in a big line. Put them in a great big line of all the people on earth that will ever be born. And he says, I want you. I want you. I like you. I think you should be on my team. I like you over there. In fact, I'll take you and you over there. I like you guys. I want you to be on my team. Is that not cool? Is that not cool? It'd be like if you were in an orphanage and you were waiting for a family to come by and pick you. Right? This type of thing. Some people, they don't like this idea. And the reason they don't like it is because they don't get to do anything with it. They didn't get to earn it. And then a lot of theology discussed over the years. This has been a huge source of argument in the Christian community. And a lot of guys do not like the point where they are given salvation. And even though they'll talk about grace and they'll talk about all these things, they always function where they got to go do. Right? And it flushes out. It does. So there is things to do. But it's not the essence of it. The fact of the matter, folks, is that God picked you. And because you had nothing to do with that, right? He knows who you're going to be. He knows if you would accept him or not to accept him. He understands that. And he knows what you're going to do in the future. He's going to know what he's going to do later on. And he's got plans for you. But he thinks you're special, and he picks you. And some guys go, I don't like that. And I don't understand that because I think because we did nothing, we're not going to be able to lose it. Right? Because if it was based on performance, there's a point where you could blow it and lose it. And the cool thing with this whole thing is if God has picked you and He has chosen you, you're never going to lose. You're not going to be kicked off the team because you're not performing well enough. But God has picked you because He knows you will be on His team and functioning on His team and playing for His team and scoring in the enemy's goal, not scoring in your own goal. It says verse 12, therefore as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved. Chosen people, holy and dearly loved. You know, I've never thought of myself as holy. I can definitely say, and if you asked my wife, she would double that one. All right? There's no way Mel is holy. Because when I think of holy, I think of God. Right? That's what I think about. I'm going to try to explain this a little bit. I'm going to go off. I'll be off center for a bit, so you're going to have to be patient with me, and I'll bring it back. All right. I worked with youth for 20 years, and so some of the youth events we ran, we got up to 500, 700 kids in different things. Have you ever tried to control 500 to 700 kids before? Teenagers. All right. You've just fed them a lot of pop, a lot of licorice. They're wound. They are so pumped that there's this many people in the world that they're in pocket. They can't believe it, right? And they're just, ooh. Okay, and you get them all in one room. So how do you get their attention? All right? Well, I know how to do that. Okay? You get one shot. Okay? So what I do is I turn the music up very loud, so they can't talk. That's brilliant, isn't it? No, you turn the music up so they cannot talk. They can't hear each other. And then you turn the lights out so they can't move. Okay, now you only have a second there, and what happens during those couple of seconds, you turn on the spotlight onto the stage, and you turn the mic on, and you turn the music off at the same time. Boom, 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 boom. And you have about 3 seconds to get their attention. So buddy better be ready at the mic when you go do that, but that shuts them all up, and they're not moving, and they'll all focus on the mic. All right? That takes a lot of coordination and tech. But it's funny, but if you get say 500 teenagers and you put them in a funeral. And I had that one day with one of our kids in our youth group. He died. And so we had the funeral at the church. They asked me to do the ceremony, and we had over 500 of the kids from the high school come to a service for the kid. All right? And it was not difficult keeping control of the crowd. You know why? It's because they understood that this was, I don't know how you say it, a very purposed day. This is a very purposed thing that they're involved in. It had huge meaning. It was a day that didn't just happen every day. It was a day that was set apart. Right? This is what holy means. Set apart. It's a sacred set apart. It's kind of like a Christmas day. It's like some day that is a very valid and deserves respect. It'd be like going to a funeral, right? Going to a wedding at that moment where they say I do. This type of thing. This is how God views you. He views you as that set apart one. You are not like the rest. He has chosen you, and you are set apart. You are holy. It says, therefore, verse 12, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved. Some of you never really had a father that said they loved you. Well, God is saying this straight out. He loves you. You are someone who is loved. Let's take a look at verse 12. And it says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion and with kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience." So he has described how God views you, and now he says, clothe yourself or put on the jersey. Be on my team. Right? Score for my team. You know, Matt, he spoke at camp this week with the little guys, and I want to tell you, it's one of the better sermons that he's preached.